You're on Team Human, Conscious Intervention in the Machine. This is where we challenge the operating systems driving our society, reveal their embedded codes, and replace them with pro-social, pro-planet, and pro-human strategies for fun, loving, healthy futures. You think that's improbable? Not nearly as improbable as life itself. You are a miracle, and you're on Team Human. Playing for Team Human today, writer, tech critic, and co-host of the podcast This Machine Kills, Edward Ongweso Jr. A fellow connoisseur of tech bro billionaire antics, Edward's going to journey with us into the political economy of technology and the deep, deep crazy that is informing the collapse of this still viable, if problematic, civilization. It's time to intervene on behalf of people and all living things. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and I'm on Team Human. Well, this whole Team Human thing has come about in such a human way. I was just sharing the story of how we ended up getting a sponsor, and a sponsor everyone's Earth, and it's convoluted but beautiful. And I was doing this podcast, I've been doing it for like 10 years, not even at break even, just as a labor of love and sound only and all. And I did a panel here at MCM, which is the studio where we're shooting this stuff now. And the guy who runs MCM saw the panel and he's like, "Oh, I know about your podcast and you want to do it here on video." And I'm like, "I can't afford to do it on video." And he's like, "Just come, we'll do it, we'll figure it out. Just come, it'll all work out." So I come and I'm shooting my first monologue here just as a test. And Mike comes in and he says, "Come on, I want to introduce you to somebody." And I meet this guy, Tom Kalish, who turns out was like a friend of Timothy Leary's back in Millbrook and hung out at the house the same time I was there, although I never really ran into him. We have all similar backgrounds, and he runs this company that's making, biodegradable dryer sheets and diapers and all this stuff in a totally environmental way. And he's like, "I want to sponsor your show." And I go, "That's great." And I told him how much it would cost, and then he offers more. And then we shake hands. It's like, no contract, no paperwork, no lawyers. It's just like, boom, shake hands, deal, done. Like Little Rascals style. And I realized it was like, in some ways, I feel so much more obligated to do right by him that we've made a deal as human beings, introduced by this other human being who was working basically on spec for me, and to me, it's like, duh, that's why it took 10 years to find a sponsor for this friggin' thing. It's because it had to be on a human-to-human level. So there we are. We'll talk about the company whatever later, but I think it's testament to the company itself that this is the way a company can work. This is the way a CEO of a company would work. It's just make this agreement. You put the ads. I'll give you some money. Done. This is the way forward.
Hi, I'm Tom, the founder of Gobi. Did you know your dryer sheets are made from plastic and filled with forever chemicals? And that over 50 billion go into landfills every year. That's why we invented Kobi, spelled C-O-B-I. That's C-O for cotton and B-I for biodegradable. Kobi dryer sheets are the world's first and only 100% cotton, 100% biodegradable dryer sheet. Truly an innovation inspired by nature with all the performance you could ask for in a dryer sheet. Save 10% on your first order at KobiDryerSheets.com. That's KobiDryerSheets.com.
Well, it's been, thanks partly to our sponsor, it's been a wonderful few weeks, at least in my microcosm. It's almost scary how well things are going for me when things are going this bad, apparently, in the outer world. And I go to sleep feeling a little guilty, but then I'm like, fuck it. I did a South by Southwest keynote, what was it, a week or two ago. And it was about reweirding the net, and I explained how I'm trying to pivot from being an agent of change to an agent of care and give palliative care to the world, And I had people crying. I had like 1,000 people in the room, and like 100 of them were weeping by the end of this thing, and in a good way. And then I went to Berlin, and the book Survival of the Richest is like on the Der Spiegel bestseller list, and they're treating me like a philosopher. I went to lunch with the publisher. It's this place, Surkamp Verlag, that published the book out there, and they did like Brecht, Adorno, Walter Benjamin, Peter Handke. And he's sitting there with me like I'm one of those guys. And then I started to think, not in an ego way, but it's like, we have to be those guys now, right? They're not here. Who's going to be those guys if it's not for us? But, it was weird. Germany, we're so friendly, but they're so worried for us. It was not like, oh, you Americans suck, look what you're doing. It's like, oh, you poor things. How are you going to be? And I mean, I drove in a cab past Checkpoint Charlie, which is kind of this monument to the Allies and Americanism and stuff. And there's just like anti-Musk, anti-Trump graffiti all over the thing. And they're there at like 3 a.m, spraying it off, trying to get it off. But along with the sudden influx of great possibilities and people, I was invited, along with you, to record this new NPR-related podcast in this liquor store in Brooklyn with a couple of A-list journalists who are also covering the tech billionaire world. And one of them, one of my latest heroes in this space, along with, folks for me like Paris Marx and Molly White. They're sort of my heroes because you actually investigate, you actually do journalism, which is, I comment and think and moan, but you actually find things out. This is Edward Ongweso Jr. He's a senior researcher at Security and Context. It's a research initiative that envisions a world where security is achieved through human solidarity rather than mutual fear. Imagine that. Rand, go blow. There's another path. He's been writing uncompromising pieces about the influence of venture capital on technological development for Vice, for Motherboard, for Omidyar somehow. I mean, and in his work, in your work, Enshittification is not just about enshittified technology, but enshittified civics, enshittified governance, enshittified social welfare, enshittified labor. Because what we do online doesn't stay online. I mean, OpenAI is not an AI company so much as an energy. It's an oil company, And as these companies move into the White House, the work of journalists like Ongweso is all the more important and all the more dangerous to do. So thanks for doing what you do. And thanks for being on Team Human.
Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here and talk with you about the slowly crumbling information ecosystem we have and the world around it.
Yeah, maybe to start with, there's not many tech journalists I feel who understand who put tech journalism into a geopolitical context. And I always kind of shy away because it's like, well, dude, I don't know about that. But what about, I'll get the question, like, what about Russia and China? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. There's a lot of Chinese people. Right. They make stuff in my phone. So how, how did you get savvy to the sort of the larger geopolitical implications of tech and all?
Actually, when I was, when I was younger and when I was going into eventually in college, I was really interested in foreign policy. I'd been reading a lot of alternative histories of human society, a lot of Chomsky, thinking through foreign policy and U.S. imperialism, and there was a big influence on me about trying to think through, okay, what would the world look like if organized on political principles that were different than, exploitation and extraction. And that led me, I was kind of studying that in school, and I went to this liberal arts college where you kind of design your own major. They took us into a class where you do grassroots organizing for the class. Huh. And I got taken out to New York where I met a bunch of organizers who were trying to unionize Uber and Lyft drivers. And that is kind of the thing that shifted me into interest in Silicon Valley, because then I was like, okay, well, how does this company exist, Uber specifically, if, it's creating such horrific conditions for its workers? And learning about venture capital, learning about the history of venture capital, the history of Silicon Valley and its connection to the military-industrial complex. I think that is what made like a straight line for me between Silicon Valley, between geopolitics, between political formations and political economy too.
Yeah, I did the political economy stuff, and then I had to, Right? I got dragged into it kicking and screaming. I just wanted to celebrate the psychedelic internet and all that. And then, AOL buys Time Warner and the .com thing happens. It's like, okay, this is some kind of – and then what they did to the labor and all. It's like, this is a business story. And it's all – so I have to learn capitalism, the history of the corporation, charter monopoly, central currency, corporatism, extraction, labor, externalities. So I learned all that against my will.
Yeah, that's how I feel as well.
Over a decade. But you also seem to understand something about the impact of technology. Like so many of us can look, okay, the impact of social media on little girls. Are they going to, hurt themselves and stuff? But you're kind of looking at it, its impact on sort of geopolitical tension. So I'm kind of interested in where does that interface? Is it over the resources that we need to make this stuff, or is it that the use of the technologies is engendering some other way for countries and security and things to happen?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. A lot of times I think about it as there's a connection between the types of technologies that are being developed and the type of political systems or social relations that a specific country or empire or civilization is interested in. And a lot of our technology is connected to aftermath of World War II, where the United States is trying to set up a global system with itself on top, and figuring out how do we implement surveillance to get people to consume as much or more so we don't have another depression? How do we surveil people so that we don't have dissidents interfering with our operations? How do we surveil people so that speculative and financial instruments don't end up destroying the economy, even though they do a few times? And surveillance itself also demands different types of technologies to be rolled out, experimented with, developed. And so I think for me the kind of the first strand of the geopolitics is thinking about, okay, well, if you have the civilization that for decades now has been committed to gathering as much information as possible so that it can kind of alter public behavior, opinion, protect its political operations, protect markets, protect speculation, what kind of technologies is it going to develop? It's going to develop a lot of surveillance, but also a lot of, murder tech, essentially, right? Military, industrial, or defense tech, as they'll call it, right? There might be some tech that is implemented to try to advance or sustain monopolies that we might preserve overseas, or things that we might produce overseas, or produce and export overseas. And so I think one way to look at the geopolitics is it kind of flows downriver of what are the national interests of the country that is more or less dominating the way that politics and finance and social relations across the planet are developing. And out of that, you have a lot of conflicts over resources that will give you access to certain technologies that are coming along down the pipeline, such as technologies that are integral for a sort of green transition, or technologies that are integral for our way of life, like petrochemicals. Along the way, you also have conflict over not just the resources, but the talent and the people around them. And you see something like this around fighting for engineers, technical talent in other countries to come to the States and work in Silicon Valley, or to figure out ways to bar or make it easier for other talent to not just come here, but not be incentivized to leave again and go back to their countries, take back.
Right. I mean, it's interesting when you talk about sort of fierce competition over green transition technologies. So like green, you always think of it as like AOC and Greta and good, and we're all going to go green. But I guess once they do decide, if we are going to go green, it's like, okay, where do solar panels come from? Where do the rare earth metals? So who's colonizing those places?
Who's going to control them? Who controls the financing of them? I mean, I think Danielle Gabor talks about this a lot. This like Wall Street consensus, where a big part of what's driving how the green transition is emerging is a lot of financial firms, a lot of oil producers, a lot of states are not interested in developing instruments that punish people for building out or getting credit for dirty energy sources. Instead, the strategy they want is you got to subsidize it and build it out, right? And that in of itself will have a large influence on okay, well, if we're not punishing but instead subsidizing, what kind of technologies are we going to entertain? It'll end up being like a mix. So it's less a transition than we'll have a grab bag, and hopefully the section that's green grows a little bit.
Well,
More.
you give the kid an M&M every time he poops in the potty.
Right, yeah,
You know, he'll poop less and less in the diaper, right?
Right.
Biodegradable though it may be. But, I mean, I was going to wait to ask, but I get... So you understand about things like Palantir and Peter Thiel and who's paying for what and whether Google and Eric Schmidt are backdooring to the Pentagon or this or that, whether there's Huawei or whatever it is sticking stuff in our phones that are watching our keystrokes and all. I mean, how fucked are we? How fucked is it? How scary is it? I mean, people are like worried about like Jews getting taken to concentration camps and stuff. And I'm like, that's not the way they do it anymore. It's not, you don't have to. It's like all you got to do is, I feel like, use AIs to look at people's social media activity, predict whether they're going to make trouble or spread trouble, and then have a different AI throw them 2 tax audits. And you're kind of done, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think, there's this writer, Peter Fraze, who had this book, 4 Futures, about 4 possibilities for political development for us. And one of them is this future he calls exterminism, where political and social and economic developments are such that a massive amount of the population is not deemed viable, either because we move towards something like an apartheid state, or either because there is automation, although whether or not the automation would come is up for debate, or whether there are decisions about killing certain social programs and foregoing populations and supporting them, right? And in this future, I think usually sounds really dark and dreary, this idea that there's just going to be a large surplus of people that would be exterminated. But I think another way to think about it is that some of the most powerful, well-connected, prominent people involved in deciding what technology gets funded, what technology gets designed, the principles that are behind it, how it gets deployed, are people who are deeply skeptical of democracy and think that it's getting in the way of capitalism, and are trying to articulate a goal of purifying capitalism, getting it back to these golden age levels of profit margins. And the way to do that, a lot of them argue, is pursuing anti-liberal regimes where you reduce the voting rights, you reduce property rights, you reduce access to any sort of solidarity social net, and developing, I think, technologies that would make such a vision easier to handle. Palantir being, like, for example, a glorified surveillance company, right? But one that's invested in making sure Western countries have some of the most advanced apparatuses for tracking people, deporting people, assassinating people. And that network, out of which Palantir and its co-founder come out of, Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, is connected to these sorts of firms that are interested in, because they're reactionaries, interested in developing technologies that anticipate, I think, this sort of exterminist future, or technologies that might be best leveraged in, saving capitalism from democracy, saving it from egalitarianism, saving it from, environmentalism and feminism and, minorities and all these other people beating at the gates,
Yeah, but when you look at a Thiel,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and I always talk about his book 0 to 1,
Yeah.
where he's like, we got to be one order of magnitude above everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's hard for me to understand exactly what his partner, his sometimes partner Musk, are saving.
Yeah.
Are they saving? I mean, Musk, they're raised on apartheid.
Yeah.
Right? When that was taken away from them at an
Right.
early age,
I mean,
right?
yeah, that's not a coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence that we keep finding ourselves connected to or dealing with, golden, sons of apartheid from South Africa.
So, I mean, is it, for lack of a better word, isn't it kind of, aren't they going for a kind of a passive eugenics?
Yeah, I mean, and I think this is the big question, or one of the big questions, right? What is the game? Is the game here to cleave off as much of the state apparatus or the civic society, so that you can't go back. You can't go back to a welfare state. You can't go back to some sort of solidarity, maybe, and use these attacks to kind of grind down people's sense of empathy, care for one another, and make it easier for, if at some future point needs to be a mass spectacle of violence, it can be done. I don't know. I mean, when you hear people like Musk say that like empathy is Western civilization's greatest weakness, you get a shape of the form, or you get a sense of the shape of things to come,
Right, which feels scary, but it's like I've got all these hints.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really hard to get a coherent understanding of what, of kind of the real what the fuck is going on.
Yeah.
Right. So they want money. I mean, I in my survival of the richest, I kind of oversimplified it, but I had the opportunity to say, oh, they want to get off the planet. They want to use our planet and its people as fuel and move to the next place. But even Musk doesn't think that he himself is necessarily going to get off the planet to the next place. It's like the future civilization. He'll be the George Washington of it, but he's not going to get to the promised land. He's Moses at best,
right.
So what? And then so there's that. There's the transhumanist kind of dudes who are talking about getting off the planet. There's these sort of neo-monarchists like Thiel and Musk who want there to be a kingdom. But then there's this counterculture where they have like Urbit, which is it's kind of Second Life real estate on a blockchain for cool right-wing kids to build a cult websites.
Mm-hmm.
It's like what I don't understand the plan.
Mm-hmm. I think part of it is like there's this general decline or degeneration of a lot of things, which is leaving space for a bunch of these reactionary subcultures to emerge under the umbrella of a larger project where the goal is how do we try to, inculcate people from the woke mind virus, one way to put it. But, I mean, if the project that some of the most savvy reactionaries are interested in, which is like this idea of cleaving democracy from capitalism, I mean, that's a large project, and it's going to have to require a lot of, and I think they pursue it, a lot of experiments and trying to figure out, what kind of mixes of things might sufficiently radicalize people or insulate them from caring about one another. What kind of technologies can you pursue or develop that might get state financing and backing so they'd be ubiquitous and then you could, use them if need be? How can you, put as many degrees separation from the act of violence and the spectacle of violence from the operator itself,
So it's a whole so it's not even like, oh, here's this organized engine, and a plan. It's not a Project 2025 plan for the dismantling of civilization. It's let's sprinkle some love and money on sort of dissident right-wing kids and see what they do. Let's promote a little bit of this conspiratorial media over here. Let's get our algorithms on Twitter doing some of this. And you're just it's more alchemical.
Yeah, I'd say in a sense, like you do have there are different groups of organized reactionaries trying to do their own little thing. And that has a larger effect of hastening and accelerating the fall.
Right, a little Proud Boy action over here, a little German neo-Nazi movement over there.
Some phrenologists over here, some anarchists over there,
Right. Well, and that's all going on the one hand, and then they get the White House and get in the White House as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so then I have friends, Team Human listeners who email me saying, which country are you going to go to?
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I don't want to leave. I just I got the benefit of this place. I feel like I should at least suffer some of it.
Yeah, I don't. I get the impulse to leave.
Yeah,
but I don't think people should. We have to figure out what to do and how to support one another as that comes around, whether it's like direct action, whether it's, figuring out how to just apply pressure to people so that people with a little bit more power, influence, so that they can help block things, even if it's on just a basic institutional or legal level. But I mean, I understand the impulse behind leaving because things will get bad. I feel
That's my question.
Yeah.
How bad do you think things are getting?
I mean, I think it depends. There are large things that I feel like we won't recognize or actually accept the pain of for a while. I mean, for example, just the disruption of Social Security, where you have like Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, talking about how
Howard Lutnick, a bond
yeah,
billionaire bond trader
Yeah.
who puts his firm in care of his son
Yeah.
so he could go to the White House and what he says he wants to he's the guy, he said he wants to make it a crime to complain if your Social Security check didn't come.
Yes.
That counts as Social Security fraud. But they've never missed a check.
Yeah.
They don't miss checks. It's
Yes.
one thing they've done.
Mm-hmm. I think, and it's also important to think of him as he's like been a key pillar, funnily enough, of the crypto economy itself. You know, he was, his company has been integral to allowing Tether and the holding firm behind it to say, oh yeah, we actually have the reserves of cash that we do. So this coin, the stable coin they call it, is 1-to-1, and you can exchange it for things, and it will actually have a real value pegged to the U.S. dollar. And that has allowed that fraud, essentially has been a key part of what's allowed crypto to grow. What's allowed Bitcoin and Ethereum and all the other, shit coins and scams to proliferate across the economy. So it is interesting also to then have them come in and say, shut up if you miss your check.
Right. So you think they'll shut down things like that, and to many of us, you don't feel it so much, or it's this family over there, those old people over there. It's not like the whole spigot goes dry at once.
Yeah, I think it's things like that. It's like the cleaving of NIH, the cleaving of public providing funds to public institutions and agencies. As I think over the years we're gonna see that some of this cutting to the bone is not going to be easily patched back. I mean, even like the cuts that Trump one did to various agencies weren't even really papered over by Biden, and now you see, the Musk Trump administration, cutting into the Department of Education, the IRS, USAID, the State Department, so on and so forth, right? So, I think on a very basic level, a lot of pain and misery and cruelty is going to be caused that people won't see immediately. And maybe that resentment and anger and backlash might feed into a kind of a loop, which will start another cycle of similar backlash and cutting and cleaving to the bone.
Right. And then as things get worse, I mean, I feel like then they'll go and kind of blame the usual suspects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Jews, immigrants, blacks, women.
Yeah, and they're already doing that,
Right.
So I think that's a big concern, with this, is that the reactionaries are firmly in control over there, and everything is more or less going according to how the wildest dreams, I guess, how they could go for them. And then the companies that are, I think, part of this vanguard of developing, designing, and deploying nightmarish tech, as well as shifting cultures at workplaces or in the industry at large towards supporting forms of technology that are really about extraction and violence and control and discipline and surveillance, have a field day.
Right. And then they enlist our culture in it too. So you have a culture, thanks to COVID in part and all the whatever Grubhub type delivery people, you got the Amazon doorbell culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which are attached to networks that people use to say, I saw a black guy on my that's what it's for.
Yeah. And it's really wild to see how fast it is. I mean, I feel like they're just like over the years, sometimes I try to talk to people who I see have the doorbells and or the Ring cameras and tell them, here's why you should get rid of it. Not even listening, can't even really hear the words
because of the fear.
Yeah,
right. And this goes back to the organization you work with, to kind of fight against this kind of fear-based safety. To a glove-based safety. How do you create, communities and sort of joyous ways of toward reconciliation rather than, fear-based, whether it's geopolitical or local, it's the same. It's the Rand Corporation's, violence-based game theory shit.
Yeah. You know, I would like to live in a world where it's like every time, for example, we talk about China and we're trying to understand some development that's going on in their economy, but don't immediately also go, it would suck if they, start a war with us, or like this could easily like result in X or Y, Z if there was a war with us. This insistence that the way we develop our prosperity is, with a dagger in the hand at the same time is worrying, because that also then narrows the type of possibilities people are willing to entertain. If you really are trained and drilled to think war is inevitable, then almost all your actions are going to be, how do we either be ready for the next war, or how do we have such a fearsome amount of force to deter war from emerging, instead of spending those resources on literally anything else,
Right. I mean, even when I was a kid, the space program was all International Space Station, NASA. And I know people still said, oh, well, there's government this and there's military that. But ostensibly, it was an effort to kind of fight that impulse by saying, okay, France has this part of the station, Russia has this part. We have to share our technologies with each other in order to make this thing work, that it would sort of fight against this, monopolize a piece of technology so that you can use your quantum computer to break their crypto.
Yeah, and now what? Now most of the moonshot science projects, or a lot of them, are conjoined to, private or military industrial complex.
Right.
And that is especially concerning when we're running up into the edge of technologies that, could either be plugged into a process that alleviates suffering for a lot of people, or be used to chug ahead and privatizing everything that you can and profiting from that and socializing every single loss.
Right. I know, the socialize the loss rather than socialize the win. I mean, and that's like, because you guys call it it's in context. You call it security in context. And it's really interesting to me, because I've been talking a lot lately about getting ourselves sort of our attention off the figure and onto the ground. And it away from the subject into the field. Right. The interstitial is kind of where it's at, and that to me is what the overarching message of the work at Security in Context is, that you have to lay the groundwork for a kind of a not even to be economic about it, but a commons-based approach to security. Don't even have to call it friendship. Right? Go there. It's okay. Don't worry. But how do we create an environment that is conducive to security rather than build more fences? Then it's like, does the carceral state make you feel safe?
Yeah.
It shouldn't, right?
Not at all. Right. Yeah, I think, and I think about this a lot, and especially like, we could use climate, looping back to that as an example, right? Is the way to solve the climate crisis and also ensure our society can respond quickly to ecological crisis that might come along later, is it to have a trade war or a series of trade wars with China and almost any other country that'd be interested in developing tech we want to monopolize? Or is it maybe collaborating a little bit more closely on this, even if it's at the expense of our oil firms, even if it's at the expense of little national champions, It's almost impossible to have a lot of the conversations where you might be interested in collaborating with, especially China, the civilization that is, largest emitter right now, and also probably one of the only places that's going to have a real chance of cutting its emissions significantly, despite its size, the size of its economy or population. But instead, that takes a backseat to ensuring that there's not a world where they might have hegemony. There's not a world where they might be able to set rules for the financial system. There's not a world where they might be able to challenge, even if it's not in the cards, the military might of the United States, right?
It's funny. I remember I used to talk to my libertarian friends in college, and I was like, it all sounds good and all, but the transition from here to there, even if what you're saying, even if it worked, how do you remove the entire social safety net? Kind of at one time. How do you? Well, there'll be pain.
I think libertarians do believe there'll be pain. I mean, there's this book coming up by Slobodian called Hayek's Bastards, and in there they kind of talk about how their dream is gated communities run by corporations with private militias and private everything, parceled up
Right.
as by firms and contracts. How do you get to that point? Well, a lot of pain and misery, and a lot of people probably die because in the transitionary period, you're not going to support them, and if they deserve to be in that society, they'll survive. Is the ethos of a lot of these people.
But then those gated communities with all the surveillance and blah, 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 that stuff, I mean, it's another version of the billionaire bunker, except it's a bunch of them.
Yes, yeah.
But then the people who are cleaning their houses, I guess, live outside the thing in the shanty towns between the gated communities.
Well, that's why you got to do the Tesla bot, so that you can have a house worker or a housekeeper that's not going to kill you in your sleep.
Right, then you've got no one to abuse.
Right, yeah. Then they have to invent something for that too.
Yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. It's like, will they be satisfied with no one to oppress? Even if, I guess that's it, right? So the eugenics, you get rid of everybody. You let the bird flu come and get rid of everyone below a certain level.
Or you engineer people that you can abuse, or engineer, conditions where these are people that you can. I mean, I think like so much, for example, of the rhetoric around automation, around robots, around the sort of artificial intelligence we might use to augment labor. I mean, you pick through the rhetorical layers, and a lot of these guys are really just hoping for, some sort of slave that they wouldn't be at risk of getting killed in the night, like it was, Haiti in the 19th century, or they're hoping for like, someone who is going to be an external mother, father, or a perfect friend, or, some platonic ideal that you can, like you said, oppress as you want, dictate as you want, control as you want. That's just not feasible, and we all end up suffering for like the delusions as these people keep lurching for that.
I mean, it feels like we are kind of moving to almost something more like India than China in terms of like almost a caste system.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate.
There'll be the undocumented aliens, the aliens, the black people, everyone who's not white people, and then white or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's like it's odd. It feels like in some ways in the national conversation, black people have now been forgotten. Because it's like we had our George Floyd sort of BLM moment, but then it became so much about immigration.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's just keep putting you in jail.
Yeah.
Let's just keep that going.
Immigration debate becomes a way to just get back to the old race rhetoric status quo, because it's like, well, what the real issue is, it's race. Certain groups of people are just more violent, and these sorts of migrants, we can't have them come in because they're a little bit more violent. Oh, that also means, domestically we should surveil the people we always do.
Right. But if you look at, the original eugenics project emerged partly or was at least implemented through IBM and the punch card.
Yeah.
That's how we got, now we can sort people. And it's like now with AI, it feels like, time for another round of that. But are you long term, do you feel like it will succeed and kill us all this time? Or do you think like that there will be enough, and it feels like it's already started, kind of enough populist concern that it's thwarted?
I think that there's a real chance to stop it. I am worried it might be already too late, or we're getting to the point. And the concern is not also just because of what the future holds, but because I feel like such a traumatic breaking off point would permanently close off a lot of other options. I don't know how you return from a society that, if it fully commits to this sort of apartheid posture, to this to caste systems, to remote violence, to surveillance technology, to constant and pervasive surveillance and discipline and control. I don't know how you come back from a society that does that, especially if it's integrated or implemented with, real advanced automated systems, right? But I think that there are still a lot of vulnerabilities, breaking points, Achilles heel along the way. I mean, I think, part of the reason why they're doing it in such like a desperate, fast-paced way is because of how fragile such a thing would be, how fragile even their coalition, is. So many of these reactionaries, as much as they want the same thing, which is like, maybe just broadly the future free of these recent reforms, there are very different visions of like what the end point looks like. Are we going to be evangelical Christians? Are we going to be godless libertarians? Are we going to be, floating around in computer cloud servers?
Yeah, even if you take Thiel and Musk and Zuckerberg and Bezos, you've got four totally different visions of the future just themselves.
Yeah.
And they're the, and to Bannon, they're all part of the same club, right?
Right, yeah.
They're the technocratic elite, and then Bannon is bottom-up Gamergate kids or nationalism or something else. I mean, when we talk about combating it, I guess, I don't even want to talk about it. I don't even like even that word, but helping engender alternatives. I mean, not that I can't comprehend it, but I started to feel like for 99% of us, understanding what's going on that government level is so much less important than working together in a society of mutual aid. Yeah. So that's why I just kind of flipped the whole show and was like, that's what I was saying. I'm not an agent of change anymore. I'm an agent of care. Mm-hmm. Meet your neighbors, take care of them, do favors. It's a version of tune in, turn on, drop out, except it's drop out of the market as your answer to every problem in your life. Yeah. Before looking on Amazon, look in your neighbor's garage. Ask them. But but look, that chances are someone else has the thing you need without you needing to go buy it. Even that extra USB cable, whatever it is, someone's got it. And being nice to people, and which is sort of a very bottom up local version of what you guys are writing about. On about context. But do you have well, first, do you have it's two questions. Do you have a personal fear? Are you afraid for yourself personally that you're going to get a Stasi-like knock on the door for something that you wrote? I mean, you wrote some pretty mean stuff. My billionaires are unnamed and low-level billionaires. You have taken them on directly by name, that they're going to knock on your door, come after you. And do you see sort of more systemic possibilities for change?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. Whatever happens, happens. I think I doubt, except for the ones who are, chronically online, I doubt they know, my name. And I feel like if we get to the point where people are getting swept up, it would be a lot of, it'd be probably indiscriminate, in one way or another, or it might be. But I'm not concerned about that. And I feel like I can't think about it because I think kind of like to your point, I think cultivating these networks and bottom-up stuff is very important. And, figuring out the way in which each person can contribute to that, as well as, the diversity of strategies is very important because no one is going to save us, right? It's only with each other we're going to get out of this mess. And that, I think broadening the sense of each other and who we owe responsibility to, who we owe care to, who we want to be protected is really integral because this society has spent so much time drilling out of people's heads the ideas that you should care about people who you might not know, but who are in community with you, who live around you, spend time around you, who do work that you're benefiting from. I think there's just like there's a lot of antisocial behavior that's encouraged in a large degree because of how much of our lives is mediated by these platforms that do not encourage you to think about human to human. They encourage you to think about consumer and transactions, right? And the only way we're going to survive is by moving away from these market-based principles because even if we were to defeat the threat of these fascists that are ascendant, another crop of them will be birthed up in another generation or two because you can't have a society that extols private accumulation of everything as much as possible and leaves some of these people to do so, and they do so in an environment that encourages them and rewards them for being as pathological as possible. That's just going to corrode almost every single institution and system in this country and in the world, and we are paying the price for that. And you have to figure out how do we, undermine and disintegrate, this sort of constant flood of stimuli and reinforcement that you should care about nothing except yourself, and that the highest form of expression for yourself is somewhere in the marketplace. I think that's gonna doom us, and if we don't figure out a way out of that, I think we're doomed.
Right. And they might not really feel so threatened by people doing a kind of a Mr. Rogers-like thing because they know people are getting poorer.
Yeah.
So at least if we're helping people feel good about themselves, even if they don't have money, the bad guys might like that for a while. They're like, oh, good. They're going to be satisfied with being poor. That's okay. But what we're actually doing is building a bottom-up commons community of sharing and mutual aid and all. I mean, on a certain level, not to say it's good that they've unplugged government or unplugged civics, top-down civics. But on the other hand, we were starting to live in an almost ambulance chaser-like society where people wanting their not even the right people, but middle-class people wanting their services from the government rather than, it kind of there's not enough of that. You can't just every pothole you go over go, I'm going to get new tires now.
No, you're right. I think and I think that's why like the care ends up being key because the market comes in or the private entities come in partly because they've cleaved off the capacity of the state to fill some of these holes in people's lives, but also because part of this assault on solidarity and mutual aid and empathy. And so, some people have real needs that aren't going to be met by public services or provision, whether that is, maybe they are disabled, they're not able to get groceries. Maybe they are unable to handle things in their, apartment or in their unit. But by building connections with one another, we can create these groups, these solidarity networks that go on to have larger and larger impacts. I mean, just, as a small example, how many, tenant unions, for example, emerge out of just people trying to get to know the neighbors a little bit more, communicating about issues that they have, providing for one another, and going up from there in a way where you can build trust and connection and maybe, the numbers to take on whatever it is that your landlord is doing. Similarly, if people are interested in doing, mutualistic forms that displace, grocery delivery or that undermine the paranoia that incentivizes people to fill up the blocks with these Amazon cameras or these, other, doorbell cameras that are proliferating now, right? What are the ways that by showing up for people and caring for one another, we can kind of inoculate them from this constant role that you have to be the most individualistic and antisocial form of yourself as possible.
Right. That's interesting. And it's interesting for me as a kid who was raised kind of Gen X, lefty, anti-business and all that, is to not throw out the baby with bathwater. So it's like, well, like with the guy who's with Tom, who's sponsoring this thing, it's like, I still have like a don't sell out gene in me. It's like, wait a minute, you get any kind of sponsor at all, you're fucked up, right? But there's this other way of doing business. Like, I like Joe's Pizza, and I'm happy to give him $5 for a slice of that pizza, and he's going to spend it on the stuff for maybe my daughter's going to tutor his kid in algebra, and it all comes around. It's all good. We're in community together, and there's money, which helps keep track of some of the stuff. Or like, so you can. It's not like the Whole Food guy's fake book on whatever, conscious capitalism. It's not capitalism. There's a way for us to interact in community that also involves money that's not – it's like I guess when we talk, people think we're talking about like a kibbutz commune dream. And it's not that weird. It's like, we're in a commons already, right?
I think something I think about a lot, for example, with tech, one of my favorite writers on this, Evgeny Morozov, kind of asked the question, like, we have a consumer tech ecosystem that's dominated by apps, which are provided by, firms that get like the startup capital, obligations to certain investors, connections and access to them, so on and so forth. You scale and you grow. You pay for rents through cloud service providers. That's the ecosystem broadly. But it doesn't have to be that way, especially if you're actually interested in solving problems, political problems, local problems as they emerge. It wouldn't be too hard to envision some system where instead of doing all of this venture capital backed bullshit, instead of having an incentive and ethos to get returns as large as possible, you have, transient partnerships or ventures that emerge. And what would that require? What would it require for political problems and local problems to be solved in a local, specific way with some sort of technology mediating it if we wanted to replicate that? Well, it would require, like, for example, computation to be a bit more decentralized. And that already, if you start looking in that direction, that opens up a lot of ideas about, okay, well, what would we have to do to decentralize technology to the level where it's not only well-capitalized people and their networks driving what kind of things get developed, and the things that they're driving have to be you grow fast enough to get a monopoly or a return.
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, again, this is revealing my age in the good old days, but when I was a kid, everything on computers was shareware.
Yeah.
It was all shareware. It was called wares, and you'd go on the back of the bus, the back of the school bus, and you'd have 5 1/4 floppy drives or paper tape even of your games, and you would trade them with kids. When you would play them, there might be a message that would come up. If you like this game, please send $5, to someone's post box or their house in Milwaukee, wherever they are. But if you look at that shareware internet, everything we use today, messaging was IRC, bulletin boards was Usenet. We had email was Eudora, video, streaming media was CUC-Me. So we had basically everything that we have on the internet today, maybe slower speed, and maybe command line interface, but we basically had it all. So capitalism comes in. What did capitalism do? All that VC. I would argue, and I'm sure I'll get emails saying I'm wrong, but I would argue fucking nothing.
Yeah, I would say the same.
We kind of had it all 30 years ago. We then this appendage, this parasite of capitalism came in and created an upgrade cycle on things to do shit that nobody actually needs or actually just sucks your life energy out of you. Turn these tools into these awful vampiric digital vampires. And for what? Right? For what? So when you say, it's like not even that we have to imagine a world where we could use technology to do those things. We had a world where we used technology to do those things, and we fucked it up. Yeah. And now, there we go. And now it's more a matter of not going back, but retrieving the ethos.
Yes.
We've got the tech. And more than enough tech. I feel like Dalai Lama when he's like, more than enough Buddhists, more than enough religion, more than enough food.
No, but you're right. We do have the know-how, we do have the resources, but there's almost no interest in doing it. Partly because, a lot of these guys have won the war for public imagination on this and for institutional capacity. I mean, we have committed to developing, financing, and deploying technology privately at great profit for a very small network of people. And
because of the central thing that you're saying, because as long as we can maintain fear, then people will need the doorbell. Yeah. Right? And the whole system that supports it.
And that is much more that system generates the system of fear, the system of inequality. This is the stuff that generates the conditions that people insist are rationalize them needing to be paranoid about everything,
So then it's okay. I have to ask you for permission, but it's okay then if I take the next 10 years and just dedicate my podcast and everything I'm doing just to reduce the levels of cultural fear of each other.
Yeah, I mean, that would help,
I mean, because I'm one person, I can work on that, and then someone else can work on something else.
Yeah, I mean, right?
That way I don't have to understand the Middle East conflict. You know what I mean?
You can have people on to talk about it.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to figure that out. I'll have someone on to talk about that. That's good because I can't. It's too much. much. I'm like so overwhelmed by
Yeah.
I can't figure it out anymore.
Yeah, understandably. I think that is having a platform so that you can have people come in is guided along this ethos of how do we make sure we aren't at each other's throats a little bit more, or how do we lessen the extent to which we're at each other's throats, right?
Right. I mean, and some of them, those are fun guests. Like, oh, let's do ecstatic dance.
Yeah.
Let's do mushroom circles, Right. I mean, are you all the time involved in writing scary pieces about scary things? Or, I mean, do you have do you party? Do you hang out?
I love to party. I dance. I like to go on hikes. I run, or been trying to run.
You intend to run.
Yeah.
That's halfway there.
I know. Yeah. I gotta get the other half.
Yeah.
And I write fiction. So I mean, not all my energy is honed in on it, but a significant part of it is, I would say.
Fiction. Where can we read your fiction?
Oh, I only have I got one story out. It's at Logic's magazine.
Mm-hmm.
It's called The Circle. It was the first one I got published. Part of I like writing sci-fi, and I'll have more coming out soon. Mainly sci-fi and some climate fiction. And I like reading, organizing. I mean, there are a lot of things, music. There are a lot of things I think I find pleasure in and hope in, and reminder of how much of the world is outside of this very dark hallway tunnel that I'm focused on and go down.
But this tunnel that we focused on and went down, right? I went down it around, must have been 2004 or 5 when look what they done to my song, and then worse by 2018 with the billionaire people. I went down it, but it's not a tunnel. That tunnel, kind of,
it's a cavern.
It took the world.
System. Yeah,
we were. I mean, one thing I'm good at is spotting the emerging trend, right? But I don't think I brought it on by focusing on it, or that you did either. But it is scarier for. I mean, I'm getting talks again, right? I came out, sort of against the billionaire things. I lost all my speaking gigs. I was like, there goes my speaking career. It's fine. I'm teaching. I'm alive. But now it's like people are aware enough, and it's back.
Yes.
But now it's the other group saying, tell us about the tech billionaire mindset. What's going to happen to us all?
Right. I understand. I'm surprised. Sometimes it seems like these billionaires want people to come and yell at them a little bit, or be like, you've been naughty. Like, do you feel like you still got any of that, or all of them were like, no more?
No, even my dominatrix business seems to be over.
It's gone.
That's gone. But what I am getting is calls from the technology industry groups in other countries.
Okay.
And they used to call me to say, how do we be more like Silicon Valley?
Yeah.
And now they're really coming. Brazil, Germany, Switzerland, Spain, asking, how do we avoid that? Mm-hmm. What did they do wrong? How do we prevent that from happening? And that's pretty positive, you know?
That is a good development, especially because I feel like we're starting to get a crossroads with Europe, where they're talking about, okay, should we... If we are unsure about what the United States is going to commit to geopolitically with defense spending, should we cut our social services and then focus on defense spending? And for them to do, if they were to do that and commit to Silicon Valley, then that would be a nightmare.
Right. Well, to get Elon Musk's satellite gear. But what they are, I mean, Germany is there, and what they're looking at now is, do we? I mean, it's a sad conversation. They're looking at, do we rent nukes from France, or do we make our own?
Yeah.
That's sort of the big thing. So what can you do to change the context so that Germany – what do we tell – let's say I could get in there with Chancellor Joe. I don't know who's even their chancellor now. But if I got in there and they're like, oh, so we're going to buy new – how do I change the context around that?
I don't know, because I think part of it is fear, but also it is like coming out of real material shifts that are happening.
How do they defend themselves if America's not there with nukes?
And this would require really restructuring a great deal of how the international system is, because it's all, this is also premised on the idea that Russia could invade. Would Russia ever invade Europe? It's hard to envision this, I mean, but they're also in Ukraine right now. So I think it would require undermining, disintegrating, interrogating a bunch of the assumptions, because the decision, this choice that they're facing comes after deliberation of multiple steps, right? And the goal with trying to cultivate security through other means is if we can maybe replicate another process where the decision making and comes along from building common interest at scale and scale and scale. So there's really no reason to pursue an arms race. There's no reason to proliferate nuclear weapons. There's no reason to pursue death machines that are automated or or remote assassination. That would be the goal. But I don't know what you would say to I don't know what you would say to their chancellor.
Yeah.
I have no idea, to be honest.
Yeah, it's a longer, slower bottom-up process. It's funny. I mean, there's a certain, not that I would have voted for him, but there is a certain freedom now that the other shoe is dropped. It's like I don't believe when Trump, I think Trump was saying to black people, well, can't get any worse, right, for you, so you might as well vote for me.
Right?
Yeah. Well, it was kind of funny, but
oh yeah,
but
he did say that.
What it did also expose is, Clintonian neoliberalism wasn't really serving anybody. It was a slow, horrible Reagan-esque bleed under the masquerade of identity.
Yeah.
It's like I don't care how many trans people you let read in a library. If you are promoting the welfare of multinational corporations and investors over the people, you're still not my friend.
Yeah, I mean, and that's part of the problem, right? The Democrats spent years, especially in the wake of the uprisings and following George Floyd's murder, that they spent this time kind of calibrating a way to do the best of both worlds, which is kind of a rhetorical commitment to racial justice without any of the underlying
economic realities of it.
And this, is gonna open space for reactionaries to say, well, they don't believe in that, and also it's not helping anybody, or it's not helping people the way that they insist that it's going to help people. I feel like that sort of message I feel like we're gonna see more play of that, right? It worked pretty well for him, and I'm also kind of I'm fearful that Democrats right now, the fights they're having, the lessons from their gleaning are to just emulate the right.
Right. And they won't go to a kind of a Bernie AOC genuine left.
Yeah. Yeah, because their lesson from this election is like, oh, well, we tried that and that didn't work. When they didn't really try it. They were doing compromises because they were still, like you said, been committed to since Obama and Clinton and Carter, going back to this sort of, how do we get the best of both worlds?
They picked a moderate prosecutor who is basically a black woman.
Yeah.
But that...
Yeah. Not going to do it,
It's not.
It's not going to do it. I mean, it's not going to do it. I'm hopeful, there's going to be discussions in the coming years about some of these fundamental issues as an opening to getting some of the real reforms we might need, but discouraged also by what happened on the campaign trail, refusal to kind of openly talk about alternatives to our grocery system, refusal to embrace price controls, refusal to talk about how the greed and malfeasance of so many billionaires and capitalists at the commanding heights of the economy have brought us to the brink. I mean, you had Biden doing the address too little, too late.
Yeah.
Kind of like Eisenhower. Eisenhower made the military-industrial complex and then gave the farewell address saying, "Watch out for those guys.
Watch out for what I just put together with Vannevar Bush over here."
And then Biden bails out Silicon Valley and says, "Well, these guys are going to do fascism here. I'm sorry.
Right.
We got to stop them." Yeah, I know we do.
Yeah. It's a little discouraging. So I have a feeling, because we're pushing our hour now, but I have a feeling there's a lot of listeners, particularly I got a lot of like college age and graduate school age people listen to the show. And they're going to listen to you and see the kind of stuff you do when they go look online and go, oh, that's the kind of thing I want to be doing. How do you, it's almost like, and if you don't want to answer, it's fine, and I'll just cut it. But how do you like make money? What's the business plan to be who you are?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, part of it is I got in a very, journalism has been hemorrhaging money for a long time. And I got in at the tail end of the digital media era where you had these venture capital deals that gave them flush amounts of cash and deals with advertisers or partnerships that let them do experiments. When I worked at Vice, I was at Motherboard, which did tech and labor. I felt like we were the best desk on this for a while, and I recognize that's a flash in the pan in the sense that Vice is gone now, Motherboard is gone, various members are at various outlets, and the employment opportunities are drying up and increasingly centering around either legacy media or scrappy attempts to build something on newsletter and paywall gardens. So I don't know. I think on one level you have to say, like, how can I do this when a lot of the ways to support myself are not there? Everything is much more expensive. Pay is not great. There are a lot less opportunities, jobs, straight up. So maybe, writing it, doing it on the side, maybe doing something else to be a little bit stable before going into it is a good idea. I would recommend, because I feel like, for a while, it's like you just had employment. That was great. Did freelancing. That sucks. Have another gig and then figuring out enough gigs after the career has gone on long enough have been helpful to me, like, find my footing. But it's not surefire. I know a lot of people who I have friends who I consider much better reporters and critics and analysts than myself, and they've been struggling for a long time. So also some of it just comes down to luck, having someone like hone in, focus, and want to provide support. But I think that you got to go into it kind of focused on, like, what is the thing that I want to do? When I joined, I was like, I feel like I'm going crazy because everyone's talking about Uber like it's the second coming of Christ, and this is the most evil thing I've witnessed. Seeing at that point, seeing drivers sleep in their cars so they can make like minimum wage, not even minimum wage, a wage where they would starve on. Live in their cars, fall behind on payments for their cars, not see their family, health decline. Have these mental health crises. And that was like the thing that I kind of singularly focused for years on. And I think, having something that is a lodestar where it's like, maybe I can work on helping people think about this differently. Maybe I can investigate something, along these lines and provide some insights.
Yeah, you did a bunch of Uber. You did a bunch of Sam Bankman-Fried.
Yeah.
After that,
yeah.
Which was good. Someone had to do it.
Yeah.
You were early on that. This is fucking bullshit. Track,
Yeah, crypto in particular feels pernicious to me. I talking to people who put everything into it.
Yeah, it's like money and capitalism were already one step removed from reality, and now to build another one, the abstraction of the abstraction, it's like, oh, come on, man.
Yeah, it's a casino. I mean, I think one of the things that is an overriding thread that connects everything is just like trying to figure out how to fight against the tide where it feels like everything is being turned into some sort of commodifiable transaction, even if it's a human relationship. And there's a way to graft on gambling or speculation and surveillance onto it. Like these, if looking at these, if these frustrate you, if these are like, infuriating, that's like an instinct to follow if you're interested in writing.
It is. It's all the dopamine things.
Yeah.
You take the swiping dopamine, the gambling dopamine, the money dopamine.
Yeah,
throw them all together.
It's like it's evil. It's evil, and it is at the center of so much of the society at this point. And it is hard to talk about, or I felt like it's been hard to talk about in years because, with technology, sometimes there are moral panics, but we're starting to get to the point now where we're seeing the real effects on people's minds, on their communities, on their ability to socialize or to relate to one another. These are things that should galvanize anybody who's interested to like look into them more, shine light into it, and hopefully undermine it or help us undermine it.
It's weird, as we're talking about this, I'm aware that Steve Bannon's talking about it on his show too.
Right. Yeah.
The same thing. Mm-hmm. And my listeners know this because it happened a few years ago, but now it just happened again this last couple of months. They've been asking me to go on to talk about the technocratic elite on War Room, pandemic. Mm-hmm. It's like, I can't figure out, do I do that or not? It seems like it does more damage to go on than not.
Yeah.
But are they our unlikely allies?
I mean, this is my sense of it has always been, I find it hard to think about or rationalize some sort of alliance across the aisle with someone who is a nationalist or a fascist. I feel like every time there's ever been like some sort of red-brown alliance, they stab the red in the middle of the night, So it doesn't really ever work out for anyone who's on the left interested in working with these people, even if they say things that rhyme with us, They're interested in a political vision.
Right. They got a project.
So antithetical to what any of us are interested in. We might share one or two steps, but the process of collaborating on those one or two steps will more often than not fuel our sales, but theirs.
Yeah, Hitler-like nature.
Yeah.
Oh, we got common ground here,
Yeah, so it's like, I always caution against it because on a basic level, it's like who's the status quo? Who are the billionaires? Who are corporations? Who are politicians more likely to get behind? The rising tide of a left progressive vision, or the rising tide of a capitalist vision that advocates more of the same with, a little bit more explicit racism, right? It's gonna be the latter.
Yeah. Well, that's okay. I got friends.
Yeah.
I got you now.
Yeah.
I got you now. We can hang out in Brooklyn.
Yeah.
You're not just humoring me.
No, we can hang out in Brooklyn.
All right.
Yeah.
Because it'll be fun.
Yeah.
We'll be fun. I'll learn things.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being on Team Human. Our guest
today,
our Edward Ongweso Jr., who's a senior researcher, even though you're a junior person.
I know.
Senior researcher at securityincontext.com. That's my way of saying securityincontext.com is this URL on the World Wide Web. You type that into your thing, and you'll go there and see these pieces that he's been writing and other cool people. It's actually an interesting group. There's resources and purpose, and it's very orienting. It's a very orienting website. It's really interesting to go there. I was telling him before. It's like there's a vibe, and all vibes aren't bad, but it gives off the vibe of sort of legitimacy but reality at the same time. Not legitimacy of that sort of abstracted Eurozone. We are here in an aligned fashion. It's like it reminds me of like Alyssa Court's work at Economic Hardship Reporting Project. It's like the real shit. So check that out. It's the real deal on technology, global solidarity, and a livable planet. Imagine that. Remember, livable planet? You can become a supporter of Team Human, and yes, we love support. You get all sorts of privileges, including free invitations to live Team Human events, access to our Discord, Team Human team feed pre-release episodes and bonus content just by going to teamhuman.fm and clicking on support. Team Human is also sponsored by our good friends at Everyone's Earth, who are currently the maker of environmentally friendly and completely biodegradable dryer sheets, which I'm going to try. I never used a dryer sheet because I figured they were bad, but these ones are not. And for today, rather than pitching their products, I'm pitching this lesson in doing business in a pro-human fashion. We are all on the same team here and incentivized not just by money, but our need for mutual survival. It's a little scary to say, but let's all work together so we don't all die. Oh, it's funny. It's like there's a friend of mine and I back in the 90s, or our first books, probably my first book in like 95 or something. He published one in 94. He blurbed, I blurbed his book of short stories, and then a year later he blurbed my book about cyberculture. And New York Observer, which is just, they were fucking assholes over there at the time. They're elite New York, like New Yorker but worse. Nothing against New Yorker. I love you. Don't say bad things about. Oh, you're all good. They're very powerful. I won't say bad about them.
I won't say it.
Yeah, but super elite thing. And they said, oh, look at Rushkoff and his friend are log rolling each other. We've just found out, he just blurbed Rushkoff's book. Well, Rushkoff blurbed his a year ago, and they're just log rolling. And it's like as if it undermines the blurbing that we blurbed each other's book. That should be even more. We're part of the same posse.
Yeah.
I blurb you, you blurb me.
Right.
That's not the bad thing. That's the good thing. And they got it so fucking wrong. And that's the whole thing, right? So that's something the progressive pro-human side kind of needs to learn, is that we are in this together, right? I promote this stuff, Edward stuff, because I believe in it, and he comes on this show because he believes in it or me to some extent. And this sponsor wants to support this show because they know our listeners may understand the mission and maybe we'll buy the product, but also because this show promotes the mindset and behaviors that will lead people to seek out environmentally biodegradable and good solutions. It's like and only if we all work together do we get to survive into the future. So it's like, this is on a different level. Support and sponsorship is not necessarily part of American consumerism. It's in some cases, if it's the right people, it's the very opposite. So yay. And it's fun, I like people. I like meeting you at that weird ass thing and that thing, establishing rapport and solidarity. Same as with Tom, who I met. Who makes it? It's just so I made a deal, shook a hand. It's like, that's it. And he's sending money. It's like, who does that? Who does that, right? This is the way forward. We can do this. All right. We're Team Human. Team Human is produced by Joshua Chaplin and created by and edited and directed by all the fine people here at MCM. Am I indicating this is a whole place? I'm throwing my pen. They got like things, and they're supporting us. And now they're being supported for supporting us, so it's all good. I'm Douglas Rushkoff, and you've been on Team Human, our last best hope for peeps.